Welcome to episode 274 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike and also the slightly hoarse spike. My name is Stanislav. No, it's Shane. I'm reading the show notes.
Wow.
My name is Shane here in Denver, Colorado. With me on the line from Chicago, Illinois, it's the one and only Stanislav.
What's up? Just keep talking like that the whole night. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stanislav, you're a little bit hoarse tonight.
Yeah, I am. Again. It's my quarterly laryngitis.
Yeah, you seem like when you get a little bit ill, your throat is immediately impacted.
It wasn't always like this. It's my long COVID. I think it's my long COVID.
I hope not. Don't joke about that, Stanislav.
I'm not joking. That was the turning point.
Oh, really?
After I had COVID, this started happening to me like 2-3 times a year.
Oh, well, maybe you're especially susceptible. Well, hopefully not. But with us on the line, it's the Godfather Dave Harbarger.
I got no follow-up for that. Too serious. Yeah. All right, let's move along.
Let's move along. Okay.
Have you guys noticed that food doesn't taste as good either?
And
like when?
And my Yankee candles don't smell as good?
Yeah. And my Stanley Cup. That's it.
Speaking of the Stanley Cup, are you guys into those Stanley Cup playoffs?
The only Stanley Cup I like is filled with 800 fluid ounces of water.
The only Stanley Cup I like is filled with piles of heavy play products, which...
Don't put water in your heavy play products, friends.
There's a collab opportunity there. Heavy play times Stanley. That's Randy. That's free suggestion. You take that one, run with it. It's a new-ish card gaming accessories brand. I
cannot confirm if decks stick to the side of a Stanley Cup or not. If the Equip Mag system sticks to the side of a Stanley Cup, but it might just. So if you got one handy, try it out.
The Mag-Equip, definitely not associated with heavy play.
For sure.
I don't know if it can be. It was said too close together. Tanner, do your best. Heavy play improves your gameplay and your game day, as we say every week. I was honestly just moving my heavy play products around. I was in my my gaming cabinet, getting some cards around. I sold some Sorens, y'all. 2 Sorens on their way to an associate.
Fun fact about Shane. Most of us have a walk-in closet for our shoes and suits. Shane, his is deck boxes and magic cards.
Yeah.
But wait. Mine actually is. I actually do have a closet that's completely full of magic cards in my house.
Yes, you do. I've seen it.
It's not a walk-in.
I mean, you could walk in.
You just can't walk back out.
You don't have a lot of room to... Yeah. You can't leave, and there's not a lot of room to move around. It's kind of coffin-like.
If you walk into it, you'll probably fall into the sump pump in the back of it. Which, ask me how I feel about having my magic decks in a closet with a sump pump.
That seems somewhat dicey. Speaking of dice... Heavy Play has dice boxes. They have deck boxes. They have play mats. I cannot guarantee they would protect your cards from sump pump accidents, but they do protect them when they're in your backpack, your tote bag, your fanny pack. They have enhanced ergonomics, enhanced mobility, enhanced protection. As Dave mentioned, Equip Mag system allows you to magnetically, say this correctly, attach dice boxes to your deck boxes, to your playmat, carry them all around in a single hand. Most importantly, besides just the magnet stuff, these are, quite likely, in my opinion, the most premium feel of a deck box. The materials are really nice. The inside lining is really nice without being like super fuzzy. Like it doesn't it's like a really nice microfiber type material. It just feels like the best box of any kind you're going to get.
Yeah, honestly, I wish I could have these for lots of other things in my life. I've got a bunch of poker chips that are in a crappy box I got off of Amazon. I'd love to have them in a heavy play style box of some kind. 5,000 poker chips. Yep.
More free advice for Randy and the friends over at Heavy Play. So yes, if you want to check out the materials, check out the gear, go to heavyplay.com. You can potentially see it at your LGS. If you use our code, the DiveDown2024, you get 10% off of that first order of stuff. We know a lot of folks out there have been getting some stuff. Randy's been saying, hey, keep it up. We love people buying stuff at heavyplay.com using your code, the Dive Down 2024, for 10% off their first order. So if you are waiting to pick some stuff up, now's the time. Get prepped for Modern Horizons 3 coming out, for whatever Pioneer events you have going on. Or, Stan, put your draft deck in there. I'm sure you did, as we'll talk about later. So on this week's show, we are still in the transition period between Modern Mattering and Modern Mattering in a different way in Modern Horizons 3. This is how I feel. I don't know about you all. I feel like everyone's just kind of doing what they want, right? I know there's some Pioneer PTQ stuff going on, or whatever they're called now, RCQs, PRCQs.
Just RCQs.
Just
Really?
RCQs.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not doing that stuff anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I paid for the LGS then. They might have lied to me. Maybe it was just Tuesday Night Modern. But anyway, Stan, I know you're drafting. Dave playing some Prowess. I'm playing Prowess as well, but there's Tarmogoyf in it. Spoilers.
Which is also the deck I'm playing.
We're
the same deck.
We're doing the same thing. Oh, it's the same deck. I knew that, but I'm pretending I didn't. And you're just hanging out with us. It's another episode of the Dive Down. But first, we have some housekeeping. We have 3 new citizens of the Dive Down Nation. We've got Caleb, Mark S., and TJM. I believe one of these 3 friends is a returning citizen of the nation, so welcome back. We have no increased tiers, no new reviews. If you want to give us a shout on the internet, feel free to do so on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We appreciate it, and we read them every week. If you want to be like Caleb, Mark, TJ, join the Patreon, get your passport stamped, head into the Discord, hang out with all the citizens of the nation, hang out with us, chit-chat about whatnot. You can go to patreon.com/thedivedown. Even $1 a week helps keep us going, helps support the pod, helps, keep us incentivized to create this content for you all, and also just support everything we do here. If you don't want to do something every week, go to the store. Go to thedivedown.com/store. Grab yourself some t-shirts, some hats, some fanny packs. Dave, I feel like we're getting into the warmer months. It might be time to pull the trigger on those t-shirts that you have in beta.
Yes.
I know, with all your free time. You can get those going.
I could. I have a few choice phrases that we are considering on embroidered t-shirts.
You have some choice phrases for me?
Choice phrases for everybody. Things like triomes were a mistake.
I mean, perfect.
Yeah. I think we need tank tops and shorts.
Oh.
Embroidered?
I like the embroidered shorts on the backside.
Yeah. It says JC on the back.
Yes, it's JC.
We'd get sued for that, but Wizards of the Coast, feel free to use that one if you want to. Make some sweatpants that say JC on the butt.
We're just giving out so much good free advice this episode. I'm loving being back after a week off on a little vacation.
274 episodes of great free advice from the Dive Down.
Yes, Mana Traders, you know them probably. Hopefully you love them. If you haven't loved them yet, you will by using their online Magic online card rental service. I did it again, or I put in my deck list and hit rent. And literally 3 seconds after I hit rent, I had a trade request from their bots. I don't know how they do it. Some kind of dark magic.
You know what I even did this time? Because I'm not quite the MTGO grinders that you guys are. I bought some tickets this time because I ran out from Mana Traders.
They had a good price.
They did. It was 95 cents per ticket. And so I just added on 30 tickets onto my rental order. Bing, bang, boom. Went right to the PayPal account that's hooked up to my Mana Traders, and it was super convenient. So don't forget that they do that, and they have a good price right now. So go check it out.
They also, I think, buy tickets.
They do.
Of course. So, yeah. I mean, anyway, if you want to use Mana Traders, you get 10% off your first 2 months using the new code, the divedown_TZL. I know this just flows, from my mouth to your ears so smoothly, but it's the code's in the show notes. As always, it goes through mid-June. So, Dave.
Yes.
Sadly enough, we've already lost Stanislav to his voice. I think once he started talking at all, he was just like, he just had to tap out. His
voice just disintegrated into the tiniest will-o'-the-wisp in front of our very eyes.
It was like Spider-Man when Thanos snapped his fingers.
Yeah.
No, sorry for the spoilers out there, y'all. So, Dave, let's talk about some challenges.
Thanos has fingers?
I mean, he has rings. I think he puts them on his fingers. Maybe just one finger with 5 rings. Maybe he has finger. I don't know how you snap that.
Right.
Tell me about these challenges.
Tell me the sound of one finger snapping. Oh, perfect. Sounds good.
Because, it's the challenges were something that I was interested in talking about before I even read the show notes, and thankfully you had already done all the work for me. So all I get to do is sit here and give some takes and responses to all the nice work you did.
Yep. All right. So we're not going to get too deep into this, but wanted to talk a little bit about the metagame of Modern that's going on Magic Online. I thought there was some interesting stuff this week, including resurgence of one of my favorite decks. But what I wanted to do was take a look. I took a look at Reddit, the subreddit for Modern Magic that many of you are familiar with and probably discovered us on low these many years ago, and used the posts, the great, wonderful scraped posts for data that user Bamzing puts up for every single challenge. So really appreciate the help here. And I aggregated 4 of them together, 2 Saturday challenges, 2 Sunday challenges, for a total of 252 decks. And I thought it would be fun to do a little pop quiz discussion as we're kind of going through this and just talk a little bit, have some questions and thoughts about the metagame. And then we can go through the X2 metagame to get a rough approximation of what decks are doing well.
Okay.
All right. So
that sounds good.
Number 1 question. Did you know before you looked at these show notes what the number 1 deck was going to be in the field, with 47 out of 252 of the total decks registered or in the top 64s of these challenges? 18.6%.
So I'll tell you what I would have guessed before I looked at these show notes. And it probably would have been Zoo or Prowess. Mm-hmm. Those would have been my 2 guesses.
And they are wrong, because it is Scam. Or as Bamzing likes to call them, BR Grief.
Burr Grief.
Burr Grief.
Yeah, this is honestly the factor about Modern right now that still throws me the most. Mm-hmm. Is just that Scam refuses to die, and not only refuses to die, but seems like people have enough faith in it that it's like still one of the top decks in the format, at least in terms of play rates.
Yeah.
Like I know that Goldfish has it as the number 1 most represented deck in the format right now.
But it wasn't that way 3 or 4 weeks ago, right? Like it's sort of been slowly bubbling back up. We went through MagicCon Chicago where it was Zoo that was basically the top of the heap. Mm-hmm. And now here we are again, Scam back at the top. Now, there might be some reasons for that. Some of the other decks that are getting popular, like maybe people think it has a pretty good matchup against Prowess or something like that.
Removal helps.
Yes, Fatal Push specifically helps quite a bit. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is that there's not much different about these lists, except for I noticed that some of them are running Liliana of the Veil now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like Lily is going to be really good into some matchups and horrible into others, which is kind of I think a trademark factor of Liliana the Veil, like of all time, right? Where it's like if there's a few threats or you have the removal combined with her to keep the board clear and then get to start attacking your opponent's hand or something like that, like it rarely feels awful, but I can certainly imagine some matchups in Modern right now, like specifically against something like Zoo. I don't think I'd love to have Lily on the board, except for like the best of times when you've already kept the board clear previously.
Yeah, except for what Lily's there for, I have to assume, is a main deck answer against turn 2 Scion. So it's turn 3 Lily against turn 2 Scion, because they're often not going, Ragavan into Scion or something like that. They're just
that makes good sense. Where it's just like, hey, it's just a perfect counterplay to something like that, or like you're setting up the turn 2 Scion, and then you get to just take care of it cleanly.
Yeah.
So leaving something on the board behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like in my most recent play, which honestly is like not a ridiculous amount, but I've faced more like turn 1 Thoughtseize than I've felt recently, and I feel like I've heard people in the Modern channel on our Discord just sort of mentioning the word Jund has come up more than I would have expected recently. And I think like turn one Thoughtseize is just sort of just back. Like I ran into like mono black coffer style stuff. I ran into like, essentially what feels like classic Jund at this point during my play testing. Scam, like I said, is on top of the Goldfish Modern meta. And I mean, of course, these decks are more than just turn one Thoughtseize or having access to hand disruption. But like, I don't necessarily feel like the metagame is particularly weak to hand disruption right now, right? Like, I don't think like there's removing like a single engine piece or combo piece from a deck, I don't think is necessarily the strongest thing you can be doing. And of course, like I said, these decks do more than that. But like Rhinos is basically gone, living into sort of clinging on for dear life. Decks like Yawgmoth, Murktide, Zoo have all like this built-in redundancy or card filtering, or the ability to tutor for stuff that you need. So I don't think like the Thoughtseize component is at its biggest premium right now. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
You know, it's so funny. I have not faced the Thoughtseize in the last like 3 leagues that I've done.
Well,
weirdly enough,
that's kind of how I feel like Magic Online works, right? Where it's like you're looking for patterns. It's like, oh, I saw 3 people play Thoughtseize.
Yeah.
Thoughtseize is back.
Where I'm just facing lots of lightning bolts and lava darts and Dragon Rage's channelers.
Yeah,
and
that's
stuff like
definitely
that.
Back. That's for sure.
And let's talk about the next deck in the list.
Yes.
Which 30 of the 252 decks that we were looking at, or 11.9% of those, were Prowess, baby.
Okay. So one of my guesses was vaguely correct.
I have to say this, though. We are so back. That's what people say now. I heard that's what the kids say. I don't remember what it's from. We are so back.
We're so back.
Yeah.
We're back, baby. In Prowess form.
It's tons of different flavors. It's Izzet. It's Teamer. It's Red Green, which is what Shane and I were playing this week. Red Green Prowess. And so we'll talk about all that one in particular a little bit later. But yeah, it was 11.9% of the field. People are very into Prowess right now.
I mean, it makes sense, I think, right? Like, I mean, the challenges, of course, are not areas where you want to be super experimental, I imagine. Like, the investment is somewhat high. You don't want to just play something as a lark like you might in a league, or like if you're a streamer or something like that. But yeah, I think like you have a hammer in the sense of whatever that guy's name is, the flying thing.
Yep, slick shot, show off.
Yeah, when you have a slick shot, everything is a nail, as they say. And I think like it's perhaps more than just slick shot. Like I think people just really want to have an excuse to play Prowess decks, and slick shot's a really good one. I mean, combined with perhaps performance, right?
Apparently, lots of us want to have an excuse to play Prowess decks, though, because I thought I was kind of alone. And then this card came back, and even Andrea Mengucci is out there being like, I love Prowess.
Yeah, I need to watch that video from Mengucci because I'm sure it's fun, and it's a deck we did play this week.
Yes,
I didn't want his influence on my takes.
No, I just went directly for just a cool deck that plays Tarmogoyf.
Prowess is popular. I think there's a lot of ways to build the deck. I think there's a lot of ways to a lot of different options to be playing. So why not?
That's right.
I definitely have some questions / takes / thoughts on the Gruul variant that I'm excited to talk to you about. So
yes.
I just have to sit on my microphone for a minute while we finish talking about these challenges, I suppose.
And while we also vamp and try to fill the 30 minutes of content that Stan was going to bring this episode that we're not going to talk about now.
Yeah, we had like multiple pages of Stan notes, so we just have to be entertaining and informative without all. I'm just going to read Stan stuff in my best Stan impression and see how that goes.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so the last
hey guys,
decks
me Stanislav
in the top 5. The last decks in the top 5 were Titan at 8.7% with 22 entries in this 252, and then Yawgmoth and Zoo both with 18 decks or 7.14%. Yawgmoth and Zoo. I have to be honest, I kind of thought it was interesting. When I looked at this list, I was like, wow, Zoo has really kind of fallen off recently, and I don't totally understand why. Is it not good against Prowess? I don't see why it wouldn't be good against that, but
Yeah, I'm clueless. Like, it could just be a dip in the aggressive players, or like, hey, I've got a different aggressive toy to play with in Prowess. I'm not going to be on Zoo. I don't necessarily know what would be a new predator or a shift in the metagame. Like, I'm looking at the Goldfish pages and I'm switching between 7 days, 14 days, and 30 days, and it's not like there's anything dynamic at all about sort of the metagame that we're seeing here. So, yeah, might just be, Magic Online, we've mentioned this in the past, I think is a very dynamic metagame, and sometimes I feel like it's a little group thinkish, and not in a bad, I don't mean that in a negative way. It just means kind of like, I think people can latch on to more recent trends, whether they're seeing like people stream it or content creators talking about it or seeing it show up in results and just being like, this looks interesting. I want to run this, and they can. So might as well do it.
yeah, for what it's worth, domain aggro on mtgdex.net is 71% to beat Is It Prowess, according to their sample that they have, which is 34 matches. I haven't gotten to try that particularly yet, but that's interesting. So I don't know, maybe people are just trying something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so many reasons.
Yep. So the other thing that was interesting with this was that when I looked around, it was nice to see at least 20% of this field was running one of decks. So there were lots of people who were running, of course, lots of other essentially. And so there was still some, but this deck, we talked a couple of weeks ago about Energy Minneapolis, and we were like, wow, there's 15 decks that are making up the top 50% of the metagame. Well, not on Magic Online and not right now, because right now, if you look at this, there's basically 5 decks that are making up that top half of the metagame.
Yeah, I think, it's Modern, I think, is pretty darn stable, besides perhaps the most recent, injection of Slickshot into the metagame.
Yep.
No one's really, I think, experimenting deeply in terms of deck building. Everyone's just sort of biding their time into Horizons 3, I think, right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably true. Content creators aside. Okay, so the other thing that's nice about what Bamsing's posts have on them on Reddit is that they pull the X or 2 better decks and list them separately in a like a second area on the post. So I went through and found that there were 72 X or 2 better decks from this sample of 252 decks. That is 28% of the field. So just keep that number in mind, because that to me means that's the baseline for like a good conversion rate. Did 28% of your players get through with an X and 2 deck? So what's interesting is that Scam seems to be smashing it with play rate and a ton of people, but the conversion rate, only 13 players who played Scam had that X or 2 threshold, met that threshold, and that is a 27.6% quote unquote conversion rate. So it's right on the money.
They met expectations.
Yeah. But here's the thing that's really interesting.
My favorite year-end review.
Yeah, met expectations. Oof. Yeah. You know what that means? That means you did not meet expectations, and you better be looking up some stuff.
Oh man, really?
Yeah.
I always thought it was fine.
Well,
it was like a B.
Yeah. It's funny when you find those places where they're like, we'd never give anybody 4s or 5s. We only give out 3s unless somebody's really awesome. And it's like, well, that's good. That's great for morale.
Those are my least favorite survey response type people.
Yeah.
Which is, my current career, I suppose. And there's like, why did you give that 4? And they're like, because I never give a 5 to anything. There's always room for improvement. And I'm like, what? This is like a restaurant. This is a cell phone provider. This is not, I don't know what. But
a restaurant / cell phone provider? Whoa.
Yeah, those are my favorite places, like Applebee's. Get at us.
The bourbon bacon bourbon burger?
The bourbon bacon burger. The Oreo shake.
Yeah. Delicious quesadilla. We're going to talk about Survivor later, right?
Oh, let's do it.
I guess.
I mean,
it's
honestly,
a shame to do it without Stan.
It's a total shame. But this, I mean, I have come around, I think, to this season.
All right, we'll do a very small wind down later just to annoy everybody.
Oh yeah,
and talk about Survivor.
They can turn it off, and they can hear us talk about Survivor.
That's why we put it at the end. So the rest of the top 4 decks, they all did great. They all did better than the baseline conversion rate, which is very interesting.
So all the highly played decks also were the good decks.
Correct.
So don't play rogue stuff. Let the metagame guide your hand. It's up there for a reason, is what we're saying.
Yeah, maybe over on Magic Online anyway, because listen to this. Prowess's conversion rate was 36.6%. Titan's conversion rate was 31.8%. That's basically the baseline, really, because if it had been 6, if it was 7 decks that made it, if it had been 6, it would have been lower than 28. So Prowess is a little over the baseline, probably 2 or 3 decks over the baseline. Yawgmoth was 44.4%. So 8 players that played Yawgmoth made it to X and 2.
Well, Dave, who would possibly be prepared for Yawgmoth in today's Modern? It's a new forest. People don't have the tech built yet.
It's only the 4th most played deck and has been the most popular deck on and off for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird.
And then Zoo had a conversion rate of 50%. Half of the players that played Zoo made it to X and 2.
Zoo's good. I mean,
I guess it is.
I mean, I want to talk. Well, we'll talk more about kind of like, Zoo versus Prowess, perhaps, or like, we've both played Zoo, we've both played Prowess. I definitely have some thoughts about strengths and opportunities for both of them. Because, I mean, what works better than like just a few creatures with spells that you need to support them is just a bunch of creatures that don't really need support.
Wrong.
Besides playing lands.
Wrong.
Okay, I mean,
disagree.
That's fair.
But apparently the win rates agree with you. I will say, for what it's worth, Domain Aggro, 50% against Yawgmoth, 48% against Amulet Titan, 58% against Rakdos Evoke. Like I said, it's 70% against Prowess, which I feel like is a spurious number. So against those other 4 decks, it's according to this, it smashes Rakdos and does well against Prowess, but doesn't really do great against Amulet or Yawgmoth.
Dave, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Off the top of your head, do you know the difference between the words specious and spurious? Specious is like doubtful, like seems like a falsehood.
Spurious is a lie.
I don't know. I mean, like, I'm asking you.
I think spurious is like maliciously a lie.
Okay, and specious is like doubtful.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I like both these words.
Why are you looking at specious and spurious right now?
Well, because you said spurious. And I
did not say spurious, my friend. I don't know why.
You 100% did.
Did I?
We're going to check the tapes
All right.
when this episode gets published.
Spurious.
Okay, so what did we learn from this, Dave? Do you have any takes from this?
I mean, my takes are the decks that are good. So Prowess is good, and it's legit, is my take number 1, I guess.
Probably.
Like, it's back, and it's probably good right now. There doesn't seem to be anything that's particularly well, stats from Zoo aside, it seems like it's fitting into this top tier right now, and people are
this is why Jundy's back.
It. Yes. Yeah, maybe. And the other thing is that if you play one of these tier decks, you shouldn't feel like it's off. Like, they're all pretty good right now. Now, on the other hand, we didn't talk about Murktide, Tron, Hammer Time, Hardened Scales, like all these other decks that are doing much more kind of average.
Yeah. How was Living End in the stats, by the way?
In the stats, I think Living End is very confused. For what it's worth, Living End is barely showing up down here.
Because the reason I bring this up,
52% in 265 matches, according to mtgdex.net for recent. This is not a matching. This doesn't match the sample of tournaments we were talking about. It's just the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. The reason I bring this up is because we're talking about Modern. We're talking about challenges. Is, to my surprise, is that Living End is still a thing. It might not necessarily be as good of a thing as it once was, but like 4-color Living End with Ardent Plea is still around. It's still a thing that people are playing. There were 5 copies in the top 64 on one of the challenges this past weekend. There were only 2 on another one. Like it's not a high performing deck right now, but people are definitely still into playing this deck. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised at its place in the Modern metagame and Rhinos basically just getting apparently blown up.
Completely gone.
People were very quick to punt that one into the sun, apparently. The Rhino truthers out there were perhaps not as dedicated as they thought, or maybe the deck just stinks right now because maybe it's just different enough. But I mean, like, I'm interested in seeing like some new tech in Living End, like, or new old tech, like, Fairy Macabre, which was reprinted in Modern Masters 1. That's how old this card is. That was it, had a reprint back then. Just this is worth it. Like, you get to exile cards out of graveyards when you discard it and then bring it back later just for your nice 2/2 flyer, I suppose. That's worth running like a 2 of. But yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing to show, like, hey, like, if you can still do your Living End things, you might as well just play Ardent. Like, I mean, it literally runs just for Ardent Plea. And of course, Shardless
that's
Agent.
all it's running? Yeah.
Well, it's Ardent Plea and Shardless Agent, right?
Right.
So it's like,
that makes sense.
That's the switch, is just add some white to your mana base and play some, and just play your Living End. Go for it.
Well, it's not like you're hard casting it, so what do you care?
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, I kind of want to like play it again now just to like see how it's feeling out there, because like it doesn't seem like a drastic shift. So for a deck like Living End.
Yeah, very interesting. I was just looking at Fairy Macabre again and just being like, I guess they are just playing it to be able to target a few things in graveyards and then
reanimation strategies.
Yeah, exactly.
Delirium strategies.
I was going to say creativity.
Yeah, creativity. There's a lot of like, small stuff that just is kind of like, hey, this is some potential value. But
you see any other interesting decks?
Everyone's just running 2 up. It just seems like we have all agreed that 2 Fairy Macabre is like the way to go.
They all hang out in the same Discord.
That's a very good point. No, I mean, I'm sort of surprised at where we are in Modern right now, right? Which is like a combination of, I think, people kind of playing what they want, perhaps more in paper tournaments like we've seen at the NRG, and sort of the consolidation around what might be the good decks in Modern, and like stuff that maybe can't prey on those or just doesn't have the sheer strength or the reliability, like Hardened Scales or Footfalls or like the Omnath decks or Coffers or things like that. Even Goryo's Vengeance has drifted back down into like tier 3-ish status in terms of representation. Where
that's a great point. I'm kind of surprised that one hasn't hung around to do a little more.
I think Modern is a format where you can do big flashy things like, reanimate a Gristlebrand or get 10 power for 3 mana or a quite a bit more power for 3 mana with Living End. But like, you sometimes don't have to when you play a Domain Zoo deck with 20 creatures that can all crush your skull in pretty efficiently, or play main deck counter spell, or main deck like 1 mana effectively counter spell. Just like there's just a lot of power inherent in a lot of these strategies that have stuck around for months and years, like Yawgmoth, Titan, Scam, Creativity, Murktide. Even Tron, for I'm sure its performance still never matches up with this metagame representation.
But I'll tell you, every time I'm in a league, I'm guaranteed to play Tron and Murktide one time in a league.
One time. So yeah, I mean, like I don't think I'm saying anything like particularly novel or revolutionary here, but I guess like the thing that maybe surprises me the most is on Magic Online, like the consolidation we are seeing. Maybe just because people like, it's nice to win some tickets. You don't want to lose money playing on Magic Online. You want to win your challenges, of course. So I think Magic Online and paper tournaments are going to be a little bifurcated right now. Like, the next, if we have a paper tournament between now and MH3, I'm sure there's probably like some kind of NRG event we'll be talking about. And we'll see kind of what goes on in the paper world versus the online world.
Yep.
As everyone just sort of waits to see what the heck Modern Horizons 3 will bring us, besides what we talked about last week, of course.
Yes.
I know that.
Given that Stan is not here and we might need to fill some time, we could also, you and I could talk about a couple of Modern Horizon 3 cards because we weren't on the show.
That's a good idea.
So we could do that in a minute.
I've actually been trying to not look at these too much, honestly. Yeah. Like I've been trying to not eat this bite by bite. I kind of like want the whole meal to be delivered. I'm just gonna wait for everyone to get to the party before you start snacking, I suppose. But I'm all for it.
You're more disciplined than me. All right, well let's stop talking about this tournament.
Yeah.
And then why don't we pop over to talking about not domain. Sorry. Gruul aggro.
I mean, I'll take a domain aggro deck.
Domain aggro. Gruul aggro, I mean.
Yeah, so this is the thing now. I don't know where this came from exactly. I'm sure it's
do.
a sort of a natural evolution of these kinds of strategies.
I mean, I think it came from Andrea Mengucci, no?
You think he was the first?
I think he kind of was.
It might have been like the first time the deck that I saw was from a couple of days ago. We've seen some, it showed up in some challenges, but yeah, I mean, if Mengucci made it popular, then it makes total sense because he's a content creator that people like, including me. So let's talk a little bit about this deck. I'll talk about what I played. I played a version of this deck by a player who's Death Grips. They went 5-2 in a recent Modern Challenge, good enough for 13th place. It was the best one I could find quickly that also looked like a deck I'd want to play. And this is a beautiful deck list, Dave. It's got 4 DRC, 4 Swift Spear, 4 Questing Druid, 4 Slick Shot, and of course 4 Tarmogoyf.
Well, no. Of course. What?
Of course, Tarmogoyf is back in Tarmogoyf form. More on that later. Spells are kind of what you'd expect, like play sets of Bauble, Bolt, Lava Dart. Again, we're seeing a deck of this style run for Abundant Harvest, which kind of gives you like a cheap sorcery cycler that gives you some selection.
It's preordained.
It's not bad.
It's very. I have thoughts. Okay, you keep going.
This is a question.
This
is a question I need input on.
Yes,
later
fine.
About Abundant Harvest.
Yep.
And then this deck has 2 mutagenic growth for classic Prowess-y style damage out of nowhere, and 2 Tarfire for the typal, formerly tribal card type in the yard. And then of course 2 Underworld Breach gets you some recursion, some potential reach. I actually I got one of my first opportunities to win a game kind of out of nowhere with an Underworld Breach. I was off by 1 point of damage, but it was very close. And I was like, oh, that's what Underworld Breach can do. I forgot.
There's so many things that Underworld Breach can do.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that.
So Andrea finished second in the Modern Challenge on May 4th, which is Saturday.
Yes.
With
that is before the Death Grips deck.
Yes. So I do think that he did this. And then he went and played it in paper, I think, after that as well, and did well.
Is he Edrobros 3? Is that Mengucci?
No, I think Mengucci is Norol Grande, I thought.
Okay. Because that person also finished pretty darn well. But go on. Okay. So what?
So you just went through the anatomy of the deck. Here's what's different about this deck that maybe you didn't notice. So number one, huge thing that's different about this deck from other Prowess decks. We're missing one of the 1-drops.
We are missing the bad 1-drop.
Is it bad? Is it the bad one?
Soulscar Mage?
Soulscar Mage. So look, I'm not going to shed a lot of tears over Soulscar Mage. I have played Prowess decks recently. For example, Ryan Overturf plays Prowess without Dragon's Rage Channeler, I believe, even though he's still playing Bauble. I think that the list from Minneapolis had 0 Dragon's Rage Channeler and 4 Soulscar Mages. So he values the Prowess triggers off of that and the shrinking ability over the DRC. Now, I'm going to tell you something. I didn't realize that Soulscar Mage was not in this deck until well after I finished the league. When I was doing dishes this afternoon, I was thinking about what we're going to talk about on the show today, and I went,
Soulscar Mage.
There's no Soulscar Mage.
You're like Kevin's mom on the airplane to France.
Kevin! We left Soulscar Mage in the attic. He only likes cheese pizza.
Okay, so you mentioned the lack of shrinking ability. Yep. I often forget that Soulscar Mage even has that. I kind of look at him as like a bad Prowess creature alone.
I don't think you should.
No. Yeah. In a world, especially of Domain Zoo, or like Sheoldreds, or things like that.
Yes.
Being able to make your opponent's creatures more diminutive and easier to attack into, easier to block, whatever, make them not kill you on the crackback. Those are all very powerful options.
Yeah. But here's the thing. We don't care anymore.
No.
We don't care anymore.
We have Tarmogoyf, baby.
We'll come back to that, though. Okay, so yeah, obviously the next other thing that's totally crazy about this build is that basically instead of Soulscar Mage,
we have Scrounging Deathclaw.
Yep. Who's Scrounging Deathclaw?
It's one of those like weird reprint versions of like Tarmogoyf given like a different name. I don't know. Like if you hover over Tarmogoyf on Goldfish now, it's Scrounging Deathclaw because it's probably like the most recent printing of whatever Tarmogoyf is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a
So
great
Scrounging Deathclaw, my new favorite creature in Modern. Everyone's favorite Lurgoyf.
Lurgoyf. I miss even regular Lurgoyf. Look, tell me about Tarmogoyf for you.
This deck supports Tarmogoyf very well, which is, I think, the most important thing for a Tarmogoyf deck is does your deck inherently support what you're doing beyond like 4 card types, right? And then I also think, does what your deck is doing to support Tarmogoyf support what the rest of the deck is doing? With DRC, with Unholy Heat, and with Underworld Breach.
I want to make a correction real quick.
Please.
Noro Grande is not Mengucci.
Okay.
My bad. I'm trying to figure out his
handle,
thing, but I don't want to have that in the episode.
You don't want to
bad.
have it hanging over your head.
That's a player named Matteo Venturi.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway.
Maybe a countryman. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So
please proceed.
Goyf. Like I think that this deck, it's kind of obvious to say like, oh, it runs 4 Mishra's Bauble. It runs like I think like this deck is sort of also designed in a way where the Abundant Harvest, being a perfectly good sorcery, perhaps you think even better than perfectly good sorcery, that you want to play early, really gives you an option in an otherwise like instant filled deck to make sure that you're going to hit your card types. Mishra's Bauble, a great free prowess enabler, potential like fetch land enhancer, potential information getter of your opponent's deck, all those good things that it does. That's an artifact type. I think it's pretty easy to routinely get like a 5/6 Goyf with those card types and be able to cleanly block, attack, and even like Domain Zoo.
Really fast. Very quickly. Like there were a number of times where I had a 5/6 Goyf on turn 2 where I was like, I'll play my Dragon's Rage Channeler, and then someone would be angry with me and kill my Dragon's Rage Channeler on turn 1 after I got a Mishra's Bauble plus trigger, plus Surveil trigger.
Yes.
And then I would throw down and suddenly be like, okay, I have a creature, a land, and an artifact in the graveyard, and you have a an instant and something else and maybe a sorcery, and it's like, okay, I have a 5/6 Goyf now on turn 2. It's like, whoa, okay.
And because this deck is often trying to set up sort of the Underworld Breach, maybe endgame, if you need it, and it has the ability to do so, like oftentimes you're sort of incentivized to just like, if it's a new card type and it's not like immediately what you absolutely are wanting off the top of your deck, like you're happy to bin it. You know what I mean?
Off of a Surveil trigger?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bin almost everything off of Surveil triggers.
Yeah, just because
whatever.
The fuel, the delirium enablement, just you're getting to see more cards, and oftentimes just more cards is more better. So yeah, I mean, I think it's still Goyf, right? Like it's hilarious that like we're talking about Tarmogoyf in 2024 as being like a pretty good creature, but it gives you a different angle than Soulscar Mage, which is like you need spells to support Soulscar Mage, and you need them potentially on demand, where it's like, I need to protect this from a burn spell, or I really wish I could block right now with this, and I don't want to like, am I really going to waste some kind of like, put lightning bolt to the face to like be able to block what my opponent's doing? Probably not, because it's really in your favor to block unless you're going to die. But just like stuff like that, where it's like Tarmogoyf is always 4/5 or 5/6. You know what I mean? And it does not need any other support. And then, like I was getting at earlier, which is just kind of like by doing the things that makes Goyf good, the rest of your deck or much of your other parts of your deck are also good. So that helps.
I fully agree. I was shocked at how natural it felt like it went into this deck and what a viable threat it was. And really, with this deck, sometimes all you're trying to do is just hit somebody one time with a 4/5 Goyf or a 5/6 Goyf to close that make that huge burst out of a slick shot coming online later lethal.
It's a lava axe that blocks.
Yeah, you don't have to hit somebody a ton of times. Like Shane said, it's supported by what's going on here. I'm really surprised, actually, when I look at this now, that we haven't seen Dragon's Range Channeler plus Tarmogoyf more frequently.
I mean, that's a key component of like the Jund Saga Van style decks, right?
That's true. I'm trying to remember if I guess DRC was in those decks too. I haven't. It's been a while since I've gone up against that.
I'm pretty darn sure. I'm sure it was in some builds, but yeah, I mean, I think it's like. But Jund, of course, doesn't have the potential explosiveness that this deck can have, which is like kind of the initial draw of it. And it's funny that we're talking about like Tarmogoyf more than Slickshot, but we've talked about Slickshot.
For what it's worth, Modern Challenge to this weekend, 2024 0506, 15th
That was
place.
yesterday on Monday. There's a challenge. Maybe it's on the results got posted. I don't know.
Maybe. So anyway, this is a Jund Saga list. There's no DRC in here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's in these decks.
I definitely have played against it, but
Okay.
I'm sure maybe someone going rogue.
It's just Ragavan, Orcish Bowmasters, and Tarmogoyf.
Well, I mean, yeah, now they have Orcish Bowmasters. I'm sure that like there's
been a change.
potential competition for deck slots and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, I really have not played against Jund Saga for quite some time. I think the last time I can remember was like in paper.
Other than
the
today,
LGS.
didn't you play against it today?
I played against Jund, my friend.
Not Saga?
No, Jund. Like fetch basic swamp Jund.
Jund. Okay.
Like style stuff. So it was impressive. I mean, it's really good against, I mean, it still holds its own against Prowess, I'll tell you what. So
Fatal Push does that.
yeah, removal helps. And Tarmogoyf's staring down one another is not very helpful. Okay. What do you think about this? Like overall, like I guess if the consolation or the consideration here is like playing Tarmogoyf over other options and getting access to green, I'll say like getting rather than having to play green to play it, right? Like it seems fine. Like it's not blowing the doors off, but like it gives you another angle that does not require you having a grip full of spells.
Yeah, but I think the card that you're really playing here, honestly, is still, well, I don't know. I think it's up to a level where like, it's Questing Druid is the card that I keep thinking about here.
Can we talk Questing Druid?
Yes, but let me finish my thought here.
Okay, please do.
Because clearly, people are making a choice when they try this deck out to issue playing blue, right?
Yes.
And what do you get in playing blue? Well, you get
Preordain.
more draw. You get Preordained and you get Expressive Iteration.
Yes.
Those are the main cards that you get when you play blue. Aside from occasionally having counter magic in the sideboard, but most of the Izzet decks lately haven't even had the 2 of Spell Pierce to sideboard.
Like not even Spell Pierce?
No, they're just all running Pick Your Poison in the sideboard. And then main deck blue card draw, and that's it. So I think that it's the fact that Questing Druid comes with a draw 2 attached to it that is drawing people towards this that makes you go, gosh, maybe I could just play Gruul and have my deck be simpler, have my mana be simpler.
Yes.
Then I can just run Pick Your Poison in the sideboard and not worry about it. Also, it gives me a chance to I have a totally fine cantrip sorcery in Abundant Harvest that swaps in for Preordain. And then I can run Tarmogoyf. And Tarmogoyf, I think, is, of course, a breakthrough over this week in a sense. But it's really, I think it's the other cards that are driving this decision more than anything else.
Yeah, I think I'm curious. Do you know if the like sort of Izzet/Teamery ones also are running like Blood Moon effects in the board? Like, can they do that?
A little less.
Okay.
I definitely have, but it's dicey because you'll cut yourself off. Yeah.
I think access to
They run
Blood Moon
Alpine
is good.
Moon.
Oh,
They run
okay,
Alpine
yeah.
Moon more than Blood Moon.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, a different attack on mana bases. Of course, Blood Moon is probably still the preeminent example of doing that. And I think having a clean 2 mana base, there's only like single green pips in Questing Druid and Tarmogoyf, always a classic strength of the creature. It's really easy to run a Blood Moon effect and just fetch a single forest or something like that. Or
However, these decks don't have single forests,
which blows my mind.
Which I was like, I'm not doing this.
No,
so
it was bad. It hurt me. It actively hurt me.
I just switched. I actually added a land too. I ran a 19 land deck. So this list that we're looking at from Death Grips, it's the same one that Andrea Mengucci ran and put on Twitter. I cut a Tarfire and put in a basic forest.
What's the 19
instead.
lands?
So I went to 19 lands.
I mean, I think that's fine.
I liked it for what it's worth. I know that Tarfire is good at getting your delirium count up very fast, but I was still trying this instead. I will say the mistake that I made personally on this is that I ran Bloodstained Mire and Arid Mesa and 2 Wooded Foothills when really what I should have done was switch over to 4 Wooded Foothills.
Yes.
And maybe continue to adjust the fetch mana base a little bit, so I had a few more options to be able to go and get that basic forest.
Yeah.
Just for what it's worth, mine did not have a Sunbaked Canyon in it, which this one does, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean it's effectively a cycling mountain.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, it's interesting that they ran it over a mountain. Because I ran 4 Stomping Ground.
Yeah.
And this is 3 Stomping Ground and a Sunbaked Canyon.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like, so my take is like, it never hurts to have one of the key colors in your deck be something that can survive, being able to keep green through like a Field of Ruin, which, you're going to see in like Coffersy style decks or things like that.
It came up for me in the matches I played where I went and got my basic forest and then used a Pick Your Poison, definitely.
Yeah, like that's kind of stuff that you really need. I think you really want to have access to. Or yeah, like you said, like let's say someone like surprises you with a Blood Moon out of nowhere, right? And you're like, well, I've got, 2
Questing Druid and Tarmogoyf in my hand. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's of course like a narrower type thing. Those are the kind of things like you're just not really able to do very well sometimes. So,
all right. So we were putting off the discussion. You had a big question about this deck.
Okay. So I have 2 primary questions I need some input on from you, who played more of this deck this week and
has played many more matches of Prowess generally than you.
Yes. One is Abundant Harvest good?
Here's what I think.
Yes.
I think it is good.
Okay.
I think it's great to be able to tell it if you want to draw gas or not.
Yes.
And that's pretty amazing. Being able to know like, hey, I'm short on mana, but I have an Abundant Harvest, so I will definitely get a land.
Yes.
It lets you be a little greedier with your keeps, which is kind of important with this deck.
Yeah, I think so. It effectively sees infinite number of cards, but not in the same way as something with like legitimate selection, right? Like you actually don't have any selection with this besides the type of card, and it's only land or non-land.
Yeah, you get a card that you can play or not a card that you can play.
Yeah. So I feel like if like this being a sorcery for a single green that does a legitimate job of something is like the real reason this is in this deck, right? Because like it's sort of like good early, good late, and fuels what you're trying to do. It's like literally the only sorcery in the deck.
Yeah.
So in terms of like depth of support for Delirium or Tarmogoyf, like this deck does not have it in spades.
Yeah, but you do need cantrips in Prowess.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And if you're in red green, it's like you could run Crash through, I guess, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, Crash might be awesome with Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, I mean, it's also pretty good with Questing Druid because it procs it for what it's worth and also gives it trample later in the game, which can be important. But, you need these cantrips, which is why you need Abundant Harvest and Mishra's Bauble, of course, as well. So you kind of that's your cantrip suite instead of Preordain and other things that it's been in the past.
Yeah.
So I think that card is good. I think that it's a card, if during the MH2 spoilers, I think we all talked about it being a card that seemed like it could possibly be good.
Yes.
It feels like it's been slept on for kind of a long time in Modern. So I'm kind of excited that there's a home that makes sense for it finally.
Yeah. I mean, you need a deck like this effectively, right?
Yeah. It's not really good in I mean, it's a cantrip and not all decks really want 1-for-1 cantrips, but
especially with like no real selection.
Yeah. But the fact that it procs Questing Druid, bumps Tarmogoyf, helps Delirium with Dragon's Rage Chanter, like all those things make it good here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Abundant Harvest, good in this deck, not good everywhere. Is Questing Druid, Dave? This is the new how do I cast counterspell?
Yeah.
This is the how do I cast Questing Druid, or perhaps more specifically, how do I cast Seek the Beast?
Yeah.
Because
you mostly cast Seek the Beast with this card. I think, yes.
I had a hard time finding windows where Seek the Beast seemed like the best thing for me to do with 2 mana, because it feels like an instant you want to cast on your opponent's turn, but then it does nothing for you. Or, okay, hold on. Maybe I just need to be casting on my opponent's turn more, because then I untap with access to more cards.
Yes.
And all my mana, right?
I think you just unlocked it.
So it's like a setup card. It's not a same turn. I have like 4 mana. I'm going to cast this for 2 and then get some gas and then cast that as well type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit like casting Expressive Iteration, where when you cast Expressive Iteration, you want to cast it on a turn when you have time. You want to cast it on a turn where you can play a land off of it, which is the same thing as Seek the Beast. You want to be able to play a land off of it if you draw one. And then you need to have access to your mana the next turn when it all comes back. And so you have to be ready to kind of take advantage of the card advantage that you're getting.
Yeah.
I think the way that I think about this a little bit, for example, is like, if your opponent is, 2 things. One is, did your opponent kill a bunch of your creatures and you're trying to recover? Then you're going to Seek the Beast to try to get this. Because effectively, Questing Druid is actually a 3-for-1, really, because you draw 2 cards off of it and then you can play the creature off of it.
And you always draw a Questing Druid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like sometimes even like the graphic presentation of that in Magic Online is a little confusing, because they all go to the adventure card and the 2 cards that you draw off of Quest. And so I think that actually drives home the point. You draw 3 cards off of Seek the Beast.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Not 2 cards.
It's a very good point. Yeah, I feel like you said, maybe like the unlock is just like, I need to think about like what my actual advantage here is.
Yeah, let me give you a scenario here. So the opener that had happened to me a couple of times in this last league was something along the lines of, I have a hand that is Dragon's Rage Channeler, Mishra's Bauble, Questing Druid, Slickshot Show Off, and lands, basically. Okay, it's a decent hand, right? That's a good hand. And so what happens a lot of times though is you're sitting there and you're like, okay, my turn 1 is I'm going to play Dragon's Rage Channeler. I'm going to play Mishra's Bauble, get the Surveil trigger off of that mill. Go to the opponent's turn. Opponent kills Dragon's Rage Channeler, but let's say that they kill it with a 1 mana spell and they leave 1 mana up. Okay. Then you plot Slickshot Show Off on your turn 2. Go to their turn and they sit there with all their mana open. Pass back to you. Right? So now you have a Slickshot Show Off that they are sort of expecting you to cast.
Yeah.
And what you do instead is you pass with that, leaving your mana up so that you can potentially interact via Lightning Bolt or Lava Darts or Tarfire. But what you're really doing is waiting till the end of their turn to Seek the Beast. So
just set yourself up.
Yeah, set yourself up for your next turn. And then maybe what you're doing is, you have mutagenic growth handy if somebody's doing that, or maybe they get impatient and tap out, which they should never do once you've plotted a Slickshot Show Off. But eventually people have to do that.
Yeah.
And so, or you draw an extra threat off of Questing Druid and you play the other threat and make them use the removal spells on that. So in a future turn, you can play Slickshot Show Off with, undercover, basically.
Yeah. So it's, much like we talked about a couple of weeks ago when we talked about like sort of, is it /teamery /mono red style prowess decks, is there's setup going on. Like you're not just going to play Swiftspear and Dragon's Rage Channeler and kill your opponent on turn 3 often. So I
did kill a lot of people on turn 4 this league.
There you go.
Just saying. Yeah.
It still can do that, right? That's the tension I feel with Questing Druid, especially as like a 4 of, is it does not usually feel like part of that equation for me. It feels like more, it's sort of just slower and naturally in what it's doing, because it's 2 mana, you exile 2 cards, and until your next end step, you may play those cards. You have to have either access to mana to do it, or really want a land off of that or something like that, or get a 1-drop and a land and really be crossing your fingers on that.
Yeah, I do think though it feels like it feels a little bit like you're trying to do the thing where it's like, well, my spells need to do damage and they need to go to face, and that's how I win with this deck. I don't think that's how you win with this deck. Like, this is not like I don't think you're saving your spell for burn, basically. Like, you're not really trying to go face with lightning bolts.
Yeah, the inevitability of this deck, I think, can sort of be perhaps overlooked. And what I mean by that is, like, it's interesting that a lot of what we talked about has not been like play to the board and swing. Like, there are some solutions like that. Tarmogoyf gets like 1 or 2 hits in and that rules or something like that. Or, they play a blocker for Goyf, you lava dart it or, bolt it or something like that. And those things can happen a lot. But like, I think what this deck can do is present threats when you want them, using things like the adventure zone, using things like whatever, I guess it's just into exile. So the exile zone for slick shot, like stuff like that. I mean, they're all technically exiled, but in different ways. So like, I think that's like, that gives this deck an interesting sort of ability to play around what your opponent is doing in a way that I never felt like I really had or wasn't good at in sort of old style Prowess, where it's like, I need to play my Prowess creatures and hope you don't have Fatal Push or something like that, right? And then if you don't, I can probably kill you somewhat quickly.
But there's one card that makes it work in this now. So that you could play the style that we're talking about with the old Prowess decks, but you're right in the sense that it was more susceptible to removal. In a sense, right? Because you had to put your threat out there, you had to put your Stormwing entity out there, and it would get, maybe it would get lightning bolted or whatever. Like, remember, part of the reason Stormwing entity was good was because the removal package that was available before MH2 was really not, was basically lightning bolt and Fatal Push, and Stormwing didn't die to Fatal Push. So there's this. You could do kind of what you're talking about by the threats that you chose. This is similar in the sense that Slickshot Show Off, you get to pay the mana earlier and then play it for free when you're ready and the coast is clear.
And
and we need to talk about that because that's really the thing that's making this deck.
Yeah, it already feels pedestrian to be doing, but like when you are doing it and you're able to be thoughtful about it and like just really set up something bonkers, you're like, this is incredible.
Yeah,
like you really, like you mentioned, like sort of the false tempo you buy, right? Which is like your opponent really has a lot of trouble tapping out against you potentially, unless they're doing something incredible that it sort of invalidates what Slickshot would do on the crackbat. But
yeah, and even beyond that is like they don't want to develop their board because they want to leave interaction up. But you get to continue to quote unquote develop your board in a way that they can't interact with because you're still spending mana sometimes and they just can't do anything with it in response.
Yeah, that's a really valuable thing about plot sort of generally, or sort of like anything that works functionally like this, is like you spent the mana, but you didn't expose your threat, right? Like and that is a really powerful option. And again, we're not saying anything particularly novel about Slickshot here. This has been said before, but the actual execution of when you're playing with it, like the options that opens up for you that previously did not exist in this style of deck are truly powerful.
And it's beyond too. I don't know how deep you got into it, but like so I did it like again, I'm not like the most amazing Magic player, so I got a 3/2 again, which I'm like, okay, great, I get to like free roll to my next league or whatever. But Slickshot is like, it deals so much damage so fast, and people still have not caught up with how much it can do. Because I killed people from 17 life.
Yeah, like they don't have the math down.
On like turn 4. And it's like nobody sees the fact that a lightning bolt, a lava dart, and a lava dart that's already in the graveyard and a mutagenic growth is like enough to kill you.
Yeah, like Underworld Breach and this are like, peas and carrots, right?
Well, and Underworld Breach is even beyond that because it's these moments where maybe you cast 5 spells when you have an empty hand, basically. It's really funny. I was telling you in chat earlier that I didn't even draw an Underworld Breach in this entire league that I just did, and it was fine. I didn't miss it. I mean, I'm not saying you should take it out of the deck because it's the card. It's a super powerful card that catches you up if you're in really bad shape or just lets you close the door. But this deck functioned totally fine even without getting it in this league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like another component that works well. You don't have to rely on it, but it can just like be another one of those sort of inevitability pieces that I was mentioning earlier, right? Where it's just like you have your potential explosive early turns that chip away at your opponent. You stick a Tarmogoyf to protect the board, to offer a legitimate threat. You get through your deck with things like Abundant Harvest, Mishra's Bauble, and then you can explode off at the end with some random combination of like stuff off Questing Druid, Slick Shots, Show Off, Underworld Breach, anything like that to finish your opponent off with Burn Reach or Flying Haste Reach or something like Flying Haste, direct damage to the face. So,
yeah, I even killed somebody with Gigantha in this league.
I mean, there again, you have Gigantha. We didn't talk about good old Gigantha.
Yeah,
you run it because you can.
Dumb cardboard.
I mean, it's I cast it once. Didn't do anything for me because I was kind of really far behind, but it was there. It was there to help.
What did you think about mutagenic growth?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's perfectly adequate, right? Like, I mean, so I have historically been a fan of mutagenic growth mainly because being able to cheat on mana, weirdly, has historically been good, right? Who knew Phyrexian spells could be good? So I can see why you only run 2 here, because this is not as, I mean, there's 2 prowess creatures, right? There's Swift Spear and there's Slick Shot. So you don't necessarily get the same amount of damage as you might get in a more dedicated prowessy style deck.
I do have to say, I actually really think Questing Druid is a prowess creature. It just doesn't proc off of Abundant Harvest or mutagenic growth.
Yeah, this is a good point. Like, but here's my thing. I mean,
it procs off the creatures.
Yes, we didn't actually complete the conversation I have about Questing Druid. So forgive us, listeners, as I'm going to finish this.
Go back?
This train of thought. Well, I mean, I'm going to go back to the creature half of Questing Druid, right? Which is, how I never cast it as a creature. Because, like, again, it's one of those things where, like, this is like if we're focusing on Seek the Beast, when are we getting Questing Druid out, right? And is it just like there's a time and place for it, where it's like, I'll Seek the Beast on my opponent's end step, I'll untap, I'll cast Questing Druid, I'll cast like 3 or 4 spells that next turn, and get my Questing Druid up to like a 4/4 or something like that, and it's just going to present a threat, yet another threat that they had already burned through the removal on my previous threats.
Basically, I mean that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
And
the draw 3 where it's always Questing Druid.
Right, and the secret to all of that too is Lava Dart. Where it's like, okay, so I have 3 mana available. I can play Questing Druid and Lava Dart something or someone, get a counter on it, and then I have the sacrifice available later on if I draw an extra mountain or something like that. And so being able to get the double triggers off of Lava Dart, I mean, obviously Lava Dart's one of the secrets of prowess decks in general, just being able to have double spell triggers for very cheap across a number of different ways, but that's one of the things that helps you grow a big Questing Druid pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. I kind of think of it like it's sort of like a combination of a Tarmogoyf and a prowess creature.
Yeah, and prowess creatures that keep their prowess seems great to me.
Yeah. There was another creature in Strixhaven that was a 2/2 for 2 that had Magecraft +1/+1.
Okay.
That I played around with on Arena for a while. That was sort of like just the creature side of Questing Druid in a way, and that was always just okay on Arena, but obviously having a draw 2 stapled to it takes it to a whole other level.
Yeah. So, I mean, overall, I think this deck's cool. Like, how did when you were looking at the results, did you see anything that enabled you to sort of break these down between like the various types of prowess decks? Like, I'm looking at the similar decks results, and there's like 3 5-0s in like a recent league. It was, it did fine in some prelims, which are not necessarily great records, but there was a couple in the weekend challenges. Like there's, Death Grip's version 13th, and then another one 19th, 5th, and 2 in the top 8 in one of the challenges. One just outside the top 8. Like it seems like it's doing fine, but it does not seem like it's like taking over as the preeminent version of Prowess right now. I think it must be more in the Izzet/Teamer versions.
I think it's Teamer and this are what are happening right now. And I think that there's a good chance that this will take over at least for a little bit, just because it's essentially been endorsed by Andrea. So I think if it continues to grow, people will probably try it. Plus Tarmogoyf is $7 now. It's not like it's a $1 zillion investment. So
I mean, it's and if you're like me and just like really don't want to cast something like Preordain, then there you go.
I honestly feel like this version, I mean, after 2 weeks ago playing the blue, the Izzet one, and then now playing this one, I actually feel like this one is much more where I would want to be right now. It felt like it had more game. As you went on, it felt like it was a little bit easier to cast the spells, mostly because your draw 2 is an instant and not a sorcery. And I don't know. I enjoyed this one a lot more than Izzet, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's totally solid. I mean, I think like every creature-based aggressive deck, or like many creature-based aggressive decks, perhaps not Domain Zoo in the same way, because its creatures can just outsize what you're doing much of the time.
Yeah.
And survive through certain types of removal or certain types of blockers or things like that. But like, I think that this is a perfectly strong like strategy to bring to the table. And I think you get to kind of have your cake and eat it too a little bit, right? Where it's like, yes, I'm playing Prowess, but I also have like, this 5/6 Lurgoyf in my back pocket to like sort of shore up the times when I don't have a grip full of spells, or like have like 3 lava darts to be messing around with or something like that.
Yeah. I've got a Lurgoyf in my pocket.
Well, we talked a lot more about that than I could have possibly expected.
There you go.
This is what we do.
It is what we do. Every time you just put the mics in front of us, we could talk forever.
Dave, do you want to talk about, is there any spoiler that you want to hit on? Like, that's just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this spell's blowing my mind.
I mean, I have a couple that I guess we could talk about for MH3 really quickly.
Yeah, it's literally the first time I'm looking at some of these cards. I've been that disciplined. And also I was on a trip for 5 days last week.
Yes. So the number one for me is probably Kappa Cannoneer.
Oh yeah, isn't that one of those weird legacy cards that like people were going ham about?
Yes, it is. And it is a 5 generic and a blue for a 4/4 that has improvise and ward 4, and says whenever Kappa Cannoneer or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Kappa Cannoneer, and it can't be blocked this turn.
Lol.
So it's actually a 5/5.
Oh my gosh, this is a card.
Yes, it's mostly the ward 4 that blows my mind a little bit.
Yeah, this is definitely a pushed rare. I'll tell you that.
Yes, and so we're gonna have to deal with that in Modern. Shane, do you have one that's standing out to you?
So when I saw Winter Moon, I think there's a lot to talk about here, and I can, which is the 2 mana artifact, 2 mana, colorless, well generic. Players can't untap more than 1 non-basic land during their untap steps. So there's pros and cons here, right? Compared to Blood Moon. Like I can see scenarios where this is better than Blood Moon. I can see scenarios where Blood Moon's better than this. This, however, is 2 mana, and it's an artifact that has no color.
Right. It's going to be in tons of decks.
Yes,
I think
it's going to be bonkers for a while out there. I think it's going to be a lot of people having, playing some basic lands. Like, what's good about this, to me, being good in terms of like card design, is that it doesn't really give red based decks an unfair advantage like Blood Moon can sometimes, you know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, my deck is heavily red. I'm more incentivized to play Blood Moon because I can sort of use the red mana and maybe just have like 1 or 2 other basics that are like my supporting colors. This is just a symmetrical effect that like incentivizes playing basic lands or facing the wrath of playing this card yourself. So I think that does like some interesting deck building considerations. It will, quite likely be more powerful in decks that can play more basics or have simpler mana bases or something like that. And
I'm a little curious what that deck is, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the deck that really plays just a bunch of basics?
or it only needs one, like maybe coffers, right? Or it's just like all I need is like my coffers and my swamps.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think the mana base of that has some extra stuff.
Oh yeah,
in
it does.
Doesn't
It definitely does.
I'm thinking about like even Merfolk, right? Like Merfolk runs Cavern, and maybe some other stuff as well.
Like this could be too restrictive. It could be so restrictive on it being a symmetrical effect that like people can't run it as much as I'm thinking. Do you know what I mean?
And still be powerful enough to do what they want to do.
What's interesting is like it sort of makes you make a lot more decisions than Blood Moon, right? Like what land do I untap? Like is one land enough to let me like do what I'm trying to do anyways? Because like I don't have a ton of double pips or something like that, and I'm able to still kind of develop my game plan through Winter Moon. But like it's not quite like, Back to Basics, which is actually a card I don't really know what it does. Back to Basics. I know it's like
it makes them so they just don't untap.
Yeah, non-basic lands don't untap during their controller's untap steps, right? Yeah. Like it's not something as like brutal as that. I've heard people like, I don't know if they're joking or not, like we just need Back to Basics in Modern, and this is something that's like similar to that, but like has so much potential for ubiquity where it's like, are we going to see like some weird reversion to like just people trying to run basic lands like in fear of this?
I mean, I'll be curious to see what deck tries to figure out a way to take advantage of it, because I do think there will be someone who brews something. Can I tell you something I'm disappointed in?
Please. That's my favorite thing to talk about.
So as you may have figured out, I very much enjoy, I've talked about Andrea Mengucci a bunch on this episode. I really like following him on Twitter. Smart guy. It was one of his wishes that the rest of the Horizon Land cycle would be completed in this set.
Yes.
Are you ready for my take on this?
Go ahead.
I don't think that's going to happen.
It might not.
Can I tell you why?
Okay.
Because the allied ones are the ones that are missing.
Besides Horizon Canopy, right?
Correct.
Yep.
So the 4 that are missing are red, black, blue, white, blue, black, and green, red. And those fetch lands are in this set. The allied fetch lands are in this set.
Yes.
So I actually am like, I don't think they would print 2 sets of rare allied lands even in this set. I just don't think it's going to happen.
It's always designed for draft as well, so probably not.
Which is unfortunate because I also really would like to see those other 4 cards printed, but I guess it's just not going to happen. Yeah, I mean,
I'm glad the allied fetches are back, make them cheaper for people. The art's pretty cool. I mean, of course, I'm going to be partial to the cons ones, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I don't know. What I'm looking forward to is being able to do our full set review of this. Mm-hmm. When is this actually coming out? This is June 7th. Is that correct? That's only 1 month?
Yeah.
Oh man, I only have 1 month to wait. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I thought it was like July or something.
Nope. I thought it was actually a week later than that, so maybe we will get to see it a little earlier.
All right.
Yeah, that means spoilers are going to start very, very soon.
Yes, I can't wait. Hopefully you all out there are excited as well. But yeah, I don't want to, Stan and Doom talked about these last week. We don't need to revisit them too much, but I just want to talk about
those are the ones that I was most interested in. Yep.
So Dave, we can call it here, or we can record us talking a little bit about Survivor. Pick your poison, my friend.
We can talk about Survivor. Okay. And then we can decide if we cut it.
Yeah. So Survivor people out there, just for some context on my background with Survivor, I've watched 1 season besides the most recent one, and it was one of the more famous ones, like something, what do they call it? It's like season 8, like where they are like pirates. Pirate season Survivor. Well, they're not pirates, but like it's sort of like pirate themed. Pearl Islands with like the first appearance of Sandra, just some very vaguely famous, Johnny Fairplay, et cetera, et cetera. So my initial complaint when I was watching that season of Survivor was that you never really got into their heads about what they were thinking about in terms of their strategy. Like who are they voting for? Why are they voting for them? Who's sort of like making deals and like thinking about like who's actually going to like go out and stuff like that. And then I've told you this, my initial complaint about this season, because this is the most recent one I've watched, is that, my God, they talk way too much about their game, their, what they see as their game, as their game plan. It's just like 45 minutes of like people sort of communicating about votes and stuff like that, and not necessarily the survivory type stuff of the early season I watched. But I think that's kind of like this. It has grown on me now a little bit.
I think you're watching, as Justin McElroy said on a podcast I listened to recently, talking about Survivor, believe it or not. He said, I've just realized over the last couple of weeks that I'm watching an all-timer. And I kind of think this mix of people on this season is just absolutely bonkers.
It has become like my wife said to me the other night when we had watched, like we caught up on the one we missed, and like she like was like, yeah, this is a good season. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty compelling TV.
Yeah, I've only watched since the new era, basically. I don't know how that happened, but my wife got me to start watching a little bit, and then I found out that Stan liked it too, and so I was like, all right, well, if two people I know like it, it's worth watching a little more. And then last year, suddenly I just got very into it, and then we started doing Fantasy Survivor.
We're in a fantasy
very,
league
very
together.
into it.
My votes have been stolen this week, by the way, listeners.
I know.
Rude, frankly.
But I'm glad you came around. I think that the big thing you have to remember about Survivor, what I've learned from like the 4 seasons I've watched, at least in this new era stuff, is like it's kind of awkward until the merge. Like I don't think they've really figured out how to make the pre-merge episodes really amazing. Mm-hmm. They're often just kind of like setup episodes, and so you have to sort of be in it for all of that. What do they call that in a movie when they're explaining stuff?
Exposition.
Yeah, it's sort of the exposition of the season.
It's the Star Wars title crawl stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you get to the merge, then stuff gets way more interesting kind of immediately. And it happened the same thing with this season. This season felt like one of the worst seasons ever for the first 3 episodes. And then by the 4th one, it was like, okay, that was interesting. And then they merged and it was like, wow, okay, now it's very fascinating.
One of the things that surprises me, and maybe it's just the fact that like we're watching a TV edit and they're watching their real lives unfold before them, is like just like who's not clocking who. Do you know what I mean? Like who's like this is not. I mean, I would not count this as spoilers because like it's the current season. If you're not watching it, you've probably turned this off already. But like no one has clocked Maria. Perhaps, or maybe they have clocked her, and they're
just not talking about it,
and she's untouchable. But no one's like, we got to get Maria out.
Oh, I think we'll see that. We could see that change this week.
Yes, I mean it has to happen sometime. Like just like the people who seem like they're just sort of like lurking and like legitimate threats to win, and they're just not even discussing like people like that, and they sort of like the people that I thought would be. The way that this game is played, perhaps, is like not. I still don't get it. Like, but I think that it is. It's interesting, like who gets power and how they get it, because like it's more of a social game than I realized.
Way more, yeah. Like it's mostly that.
It's like, I mean, especially with like the jury concept, and like why I think someone like Sandra won the season that I watched, like that's like 25 years old at this point or whatever, 20 years old, is like that she was completely unoffensive and to anyone and was able to keep surviving, and then blew the opponent away in the jury. Do you know what I mean? Where it's just like, like the people liked this person. And
totally makes sense.
And it's sort of like it's really weird to realize that in the end is like, it is kind of like who likes you. Because like, the challenges and stuff like that can only get you so far. like to winning immunity or something like that. So I don't
Yeah.
know. In the end, like I guess my take of this, if you're still listening and have not watched Survivor, is like feel free to watch it and like look at it as like this really weird social experiment that's been going on for like 2 decades plus. And I think like it can be interesting in that fashion.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I watch it with the whole family now. And that's kind
like
of
your
a
kids?
fun tradition that we have. Yeah, they love it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So
Q needs
all
to
right.
get voted off.
Oh, for real. My older son is like that. Yeah.
That's funny. All right. Thanks for sticking with us if you had, but we'll let you go and let ourselves go off these microphones. Hopefully Stan's back next week. I think, he's just a little hoarse. But that wraps up this week's show. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You get those episodes as soon as they drop on Apple Podcasts, show up in your feed on Spotify, all those good things. Feel free to leave us a rating, review, comment on Spotify. We're all for it. If you want to submit a question to us, reach out to us, chit-chat us, give us a tweet at the Dive Down, all one word. Feel free to email us, thedivedown@gmail.com. The Patreon, always there. We really want to thank our long-term patrons and anyone new as well. Patreon.com/thedivedown. The store is at thedivedown.com/store. Heavy Play, long-time sponsor at this point. I can't believe how long it's been. The best deck and dice boxes and playmats featuring the Equip Bank system. The code is the Divedown 2024, 10% off your first order. Go big. Just do a gigantic order. Save as much money as possible. Do it with your friends. Collaborate. Mana Traders, thanks for sponsoring, being an affiliate with us. Use code the Divedown_TZL through mid-June. That'll be in the show notes if you need the code. 10% off your first 2 months running Magic Online cards. As always, thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. Although, honestly, we have Nowhere in the front, Spaceblood in the end. I was like, we haven't been using the bumper recently, but Spaceblood still finishes this episode up. And until next week, get out there and cast Tarmogoyf.